going on, guys? Welcome into today's show. We've got a special guest in Mr. Aaron Hale, who has just an unbelievable story of overcoming hardship and achieving insane results in life. He is a U.S. Army EOD veteran. He's a real estate investor. He is a business owner and chocolatier, a podcaster, and an ultra endurance athlete. After a tragic injury on deployment overseas and his third deployment in Afghanistan, trying to defuse an IED, it exploded in his face, took his eyesight and his hearing, making him both deaf and blind. Aaron hit rock bottom, but instead of staying there, he resolved to not allow his circumstances to dictate the rest of his life. Since the injury, he has become a husband, a father, a real estate investor, a successful entrepreneur, a speaker, and a top-rated podcast host, and is the first blind and deaf person to run the Badwater 135 Ultramarathon. If you are a David Goggins fan, you've probably heard some of the insane stories and how hard and challenging the Badwater 135 is for an athlete like David Goggins, let alone somebody who is blind and deaf. He is somebody that has a mission to inspire others to make positive habit shifts that help them realize success that's within reach and closer than they ever imagined. And today's episode was nothing short of inspiring. Just loved hearing his outlook, his perspective on building toughness, persevering through life's challenges and hardships, how he turned a passion into a true business that has funded his ability to invest in real estate and build cash flow and wealth. We dive into his whole journey from start to finish. I can't wait for you guys to hear Aaron Hale's story. Let's go ahead and dive in right after this quick message. Welcome into the show, Aaron Hale.
Hey, thanks for having me on. This is great.
I was chatting with two of my coaching clients and buddies, Diego Corzo and David Perret, just yesterday, and told them that you and I had this interview and connection coming up here, and they just had nothing but amazing things to share about you. I think Diego noted that you guys went on a run together where he was kind of your guide on the run. Was that an accurate statement, or were you guiding him?
Yeah, you know what? That's funny because both Dave and Diego and I were all in Mount at the same time for Brandon Turner's show. So that's when I'd already known Diego from Go Abundance.
Yep.
And well, I met him for the first time, and he said he was going for a run the next morning. I said, mind if I join you? And he, of course, was a little skittish about taking a blind guy in tow. But I said, yeah, it's no big deal. Hold on to this little tether, and you just go forward. I'll be right beside you.
I love it. And speaking of running, you, and we'll talk a little bit more about your backstory, because I'm assuming that you were not born blind and deaf, correct?
That's correct. I was not.
And we'll jump into that a little bit. But you being the first blind deaf person to complete the Badwater 135 in 2023. For those that don't know what the Badwater is and why the hell did you sign up to do that with, what most people would say are, things that would probably prevent individuals from wanting to do something like that. How did you get into that space, and tell us a little bit about that experience?
With when it comes to just about anything in my life, it's kind of like the compound effect. Right? I start off with these little steps, and then I find I can handle that. So let's take on a little bit more. And like the Fudge company, the real estate, the mountain climbing, speaking, and running, it was at first just something to do because I was interested, and I found out that I enjoyed it and I want to do more. So after my injury in 2011, I was in Walter Reed Hospital, and while they were fixing me medically, I wasn't eating very healthy. They actually were feeding me at this hospital. Like I was going through buds training. Like I had this pile of food, for lunch and dinner come into my room, and it looked like that Jim Belushi thing from Animal House, just a pile of food on a tray falling over. And well, I took that on as a challenge. Yeah, I can do this. I go, I'll eat all that. Anyways, I left the hospital with way too much weight, and I wanted to get fit. So I started doing research on like anything else. Finding a mentor, finding out how to navigate this world. And one of the things was, how does a blind guy go for a run or get outside, do hiking? And I was doing these Google searches for blind plus all of those things. And a few names kept popping up, like Eric Weinmayer is the first blind person who climbed Mount Everest. And well, I looked that guy up and we went mountain climbing together. And Lonnie Bedwell is the first blind person to kayak the entire Grand Canyon. So
Wow.
yeah, he's got a couple of hits on Google. So I looked him up and I went kayaking with him. And I talked to it's a guy named Ivan Castro, who was 100% blind and still an active duty Army Ranger working as a recruiter at Fort Bragg. So I looked him up, I gave him a call, and he told me he made it a point every year to run the Air Force marathon, the Army 10 miler, and the Marine Corps marathon.
Wow.
And I thought, well, that's patriotic. I think I'll do that too. So I registered for all three of those, and then I was living in the Panhandle, where Florida, where I am now, and somebody convinced me to do a local marathon. So I signed up for the Pensacola Marathon, and some nonprofit you contacted me out of the blue and said, "Hey, we'll pay your way and registry and all that if you want to come run with us at the San Antonio Rock and Roll Marathon." I said, "Sure, I love Texas." So before I knew it, and before I'd even run anything longer than a 10K, I was registered for 4 marathons and a 10 miler
Wow.
in the span of 4 months. So um, I had to find not just a mentor, but a coach and get to work.
That's amazing. And the Badwater 135, what is that race? I think, many people may have heard it from, David Goggins and other extreme ultra marathoners that are, looking to push not only the physical limits, right, but the mental limits and challenges. So obviously you went through a lot of those, marathons and experiences. What took you into the Badwater 135, and for those that don't know what it is and kind of how elite of a race this is, like how would you explain the 130 Badwater 135?
Well, it's they call Badwater a mindset all of its own, but it is touted as the world's toughest foot race, and it's a an ultra marathon, 135 miles across, starting at the Badwater Basin, the lowest point in North America, 282 feet below sea level, and you run 135 miles through Death Valley over two mountain ranges and then up to the Mount Whitney portal, like the trailhead. So about 11 miles from the very top of the tallest point in the lower, the contiguous 48. So not only are you running in Death Valley 135 miles and like over three mountains, um, but also that's just like about, I think it's 20,000 feet of cumulative gain altitude along the way too. So, and it it's in the middle of the summer. It just so happened ours
Crazy.
started on the 4th of July.
Wow, that's crazy. And going through that experience for you, I mean, running a marathon is already hard enough. Doing 135 miles is already hard enough. Doing 135 miles, with some of the small challenges that you're dealing with, how do you persevere and push through things like that?
Well, of course, there's there's internal values, there's external values, those, the whole start with why thing. And there are plenty of reasons to persevere, to build up that tolerance, build that resilience. And for me, it's internally, it's choosing my heart, right? I want to be fit. I want to be tough. I want to be resilient for the next thing that comes my way because apparently, fate really likes to pick on me. But I've been blown up. I've been almost killed by bacterial meningitis, and I tell you what, uh, I want to be the toughest thing anything or anybody has ever tried to kill.
Mm.
So, uh, I every day I want to be around for my kids, which is that external why.
Hmm.
I've got 3 boys. I want to be there for them. I want to be a great example for them. I want them to be able to point at me and say, "Look, my dad can do anything, and uh, so can I." So, it really I know they don't appreciate it when, my oldest is 14, the twins are 5 going
Okay.
on 6. And I know my oldest is getting kinda tired of saying, coming to me and saying, I just get hurt, on the lacrosse field or something, and I would say, on a scale of 1 to getting blown up by an IED, uh, how much does that hurt? But, joking aside, I do wanna help him, get to that, kind of perspective where, okay, I can get a couple of bruises, bumps, but I can keep going.
Yeah.
And it can always be worse.
For those that maybe don't want to get, blown up by an IED and deal with some of those challenges, but want to build toughness, they it seems like a lot of people who are succeeding in whatever facet of success we're talking about, right? Whether that's in business, whether that's with your health, whether that's in, certain relationships or circumstances that you might be in. I always find that it's the people who have this grit and this mental toughness, this willingness to kind of suffer, right? And push through pain and roadblocks and obstacles and challenges that always find a way to, kind of have a breakthrough and level up. How does one foster that if they, don't feel like they're at the level of mental or physical toughness that they're looking for? Like, is there a formula for that? Is there kind of a blueprint, or what's your perspective around building that mental toughness within?
One of the things is just it was a great book. It was a real fun book. In fact, the title says it all. Uh, Everything is figure outable.
Mm,
Yeah, and if you if when it comes to getting fit, parenting, yeah, entrepreneurship, real estate, all that kind of stuff, uh, it's hard at the beginning. And of course, you get that entrepreneur enthusiasm, that honeymoon period, and then all of a sudden you get punched in the face with reality, and everything is really hard because you don't know what you're doing.
yeah.
You're starting from scratch. But and there are 2 different ways, 2 different perspectives where you look all around you and you get frustrated because everybody else is doing it. But then the other perspective there is that there's so many examples around of people who have gotten it done. They
Mhm.
are doing it. So it's possible. So one of the things is even when I know I'm down, I know it's hard. Maybe there's, a pain, emotional, physical, whatever it is. People have gotten through it. There are examples of success, and I know I can too. But then it goes from that whole I can't to how can I? And you start looking for opportunities. You look for answers. You start focusing on fixing the problem versus the pain or the problem itself, and lingering on. how tough it is right now.
Yeah.
But you look forward to that solution, and there's one step beyond how can I, and it's how can I so that I can share this, how I can teach it later. The whole hero's journey, right? The
Mhm.
Joseph Campbell, and you got to go through the gauntlet. You got to slay your dragon, and you find your mentor, that guru, that wise man, that'll help you find your way. But you still got to do the journey yourself. But then the end of the story, it's a cycle. It's a loop. You got to return back to the village, back to the family, back to where you started so that you can tell your story and teach it. So I've been through some pretty extraordinary hardships. And each time I can find a new success, that's also a new audience. It's almost like more reach to show people that it can be done. I can be that example of how you can get through it too.
Yeah.
You can survive. You can find success.
So take us back pre-injury or pre-2011. What was going on in your life? What was your mindset then? What was your vision for your future? Like what was going on in your world in say 2010?
Well, in 2010, I was a U.S. Army uh, explosive ordnance disposal technician, team leader. That's the Army's bomb squad. You know, that Hurt Locker guy.
Yep.
I was the team leader, so I'm the guy that actually gets in the bomb suit and makes the long, lonely walk. Uh, and I loved it. That was what I wanted to make my career of was in the military and as an EOD technician. The technical aspect of the job, the challenge, both mentally and physically, it was it was awesome. I really enjoyed every aspect of it. It's also a, a first responder type job
Right.
on the battlefield when everybody else is trying to get the heck out of Dodge. You're the one that makes that purposeful walk towards the danger, and you got to diffuse the danger to dispose of it. And I love that. I loved every aspect of it. Only in 2011, when I was on my third deployment, my second time to Afghanistan, I was about 8 months into a 1 year deployment. I just came back from 2 weeks of R&R back stateside, where I got to see my oldest turn one. I got to witness the whole family gather around the Thanksgiving table and
Mm.
feast. That was an awesome last page in the mental photo album.
Yeah.
But I got back to the battlefield, and we still had the luggage in the back of the truck coming from the airfield. We jumped in a convoy, and along the way, convoy commander said, "Hey, if we've got an IED on the side of the road, we need EOD to take care of it." So threw the luggage off the robot out, and got to work. After the robot did what it did thing, I jumped out to some uh, get evidence. We're kind of like the CSI on the battlefield as well.
Mhm.
Anyways, it was about 20 or 30 yards from the original, the primary. There was a secondary device. It hadn't yet been found. And that thing was what detonated and punted me into the air. It, you know, turned my lights out. And it was 48 hours later, I was right back in the United States. This time uh, as a patient of Walter Reed. And I'd be blind for the rest of my life. The blast took both my eyes. It actually cracked my skull in a few places. So I was leaking spinal fluid right through my sinuses and out my nose.
Oh my
I
God.
was still, I still had my hearing, though my eardrums had been blown out. Uh, they healed. I'd lost some of my hearing, but I wasn't deaf at the time. It wasn't until about 4 years later when the meningitis took my hearing.
Oh
It
wow.
left me completely deaf.
So you come to in the United States, obviously. What was your first thought when you came to and like really understood the magnitude of your situation?
You know what the funny thing is though? When the blast hit me, I didn't go up. I was still awake. I definitely had my bell rung, but
Yeah.
the lights went out, but I was still conscious.
Wow.
I landed on my knees and elbows. And what often happens in an IED attack is what's called a complex ambush. An IED goes off in a while, everybody's scrambling to figure out, the blast damage and all that. That's when they pop up and start shooting at you. But that didn't happen. But what does happen is the EOD team clears a safe route back to the team leader, so the medics can get them out.
Mhm.
Well, I didn't want them to come into a dangerous area, so uh, I wanted to get back to them, but first I did the function check, wiggle the fingers, toes, and make sure everything was still there.
Mhm.
And I thought at first that my helmet had just gotten pushed over my face. So after the function check, I went to adjust my helmet, get back in the fight, only to find that the helmet was gone. That's when I thought, oh no, this is bad. My first sergeant's gonna kill me for losing that thing. But that's when I realized I'd actually taken some damage, and, anyways, I got up on my feet, and I started walking towards the truck, the safe area, only, of course, I'm blind and have no idea where the truck is anymore, so I'm just like a zombie walking around the battlefield, probably making it tougher for my team to get me, but, um, that's I didn't actually pass out, until I did go unconscious until I was on the medevac chopper. And I came to a few times here and there from, my flight back to Kandahar to Landstuhl, in Germany to Walter. And the first thing that went through my mind, for that blast, uh, was the blast wave. I'm just kidding. But when I first realized that I was going to be blind, um, all those, I call them my demons, the negative talk,
Yeah, right.
all that stuff about how my life had just changed and how I couldn't be an EOD tech anymore, couldn't be a soldier. They don't even want EOD techs to be colorblind. The whole red wire, blue wire thing.
Mhm.
Uh, but how was I couldn't be a husband or a father or I mean, I never considered for my entire life what it would be like to be blind. And for me, my life was over. I was on the top of the world, doing exactly what I felt, my calling was, saving lives in the battlefield,
Mm.
being a soldier, and all of that was over. Um, so at Walter Reed, and okay, yeah, also being blind, 100% blind, also comes with this bonus gift of sleep disorder because you can't reset your circadian rhythm.
Oh.
So that even if you uh, can only get some shadows and shades. Um, you get a little sunlight, and that resets your brain's internal clock. Well, I'm living on what's called a non-24 disorder, and it's kind of like being on a 26, 27 hour clock.
Wow.
It's
I didn't even think about that. So then you actually struggle with, like, insomnia as well now just as a result of that?
Yeah, it's kind of like that. It's just sometimes in the middle of the night, it feels like the middle of the day, and vice versa. And so it really, and this is one of those things that you can take it two different ways. I could let it ruin my life,
Yeah.
or I could get super serious about uh, routine, about structure in my day, about figuring out the best methods for getting the best sleep I possibly can. So it comes with diet, nutrition, how much caffeine I take in,
Mhm.
um, and my physical fitness. So it all lends back to like the running and working out. So I have a pretty admirable home gym in the garage, and I try my best to take care of myself. And it all feeds into that whole, I want to be there for. my kids,
Yeah.
and I want to be that example. And it's just another challenge to face and find solutions to. Plus, the whole non-24 comes in kind of handy when you're running 24 hours plus
Yeah.
on the some kind of ultra marathon race where everybody else in the middle of the night is kind is fatigued and trying to fall asleep. I'm like, it's the middle of the afternoon for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you're coming to a stage where you're obviously kind of mourning your career, your life of what it was, and coming to reality in terms of what it's, I guess, can be or is going to be. How did you recalibrate that vision? Now I know, kind of fast forwarding, right? You got a fudge company, and you've got real estate investments. You've been called to speak on stages and share your journey, your story, your motivation with so many people around the world. But that's just what people see now. I know that slog and that grind and that journey to getting there required a lot of grit and belief and, like you said, routine, consistency, discipline. And it always seems to be the hardest part for, it's one thing when you're out on the open track and you're ripping down, the tracks there, but it's another thing like when you're in the train station and you're pulling out again, and it's takes some time to get going. Like, what did that process look like for you, and how you started to find this new path of what could be for what you wanted to create for yourself?
Or you kind of touched on that whole inertia thing. I call it Newton's first law of kicking ass. Body, emotion tends to stay in motion and body
Yeah.
at rest. And each time I got knocked to the mat, it was like I'd come to a dead stop.
Yep.
And how I dealt with it, it was almost a stereotypical, grief, the stages of grief. I went through all of them,
Right.
and I could literally step outside myself and point at the moments when I was, just um, denying the whole thing. Like, no way. I actually, when they came into the hospital at Walter Reed and asked me where I want to retire, I said, I don't want to retire. And I found examples like Ivan Castro,
Mhm.
that blind ranger. He can do it. I'm going to do something. I'm going to keep my uniform, and I'm going to stay on active duty. And I actually did for a little while. After I got out of the hospital, they sent me to the Florida Panhandle where the EOD schoolhouse was, and I became an instructor. But eventually, went through all the phases, and a lot of the times, like cooking fudge, that was kitchen therapy.
Mm.
It was cathartic. I did it because I turned the focus off of me into the food and into my friends and my family. It was another Thanksgiving, actually, and I decided, this is right after losing my hearing, right after the meningitis, and I was then totally blind and totally deaf, and it was gonna be 6 months, before I could start hearing anything with the cochlear implant again. It'd be an entire year before I could actually have a conversation with anyone, and that's a very lonely, frustrating,
Yeah.
isolating place to be,
Couldn't imagine.
where your whole world just ends at your fingertips. Um, so I cooked. And I got on my treadmill, and I would just like we were talking about bonus gifts with the blindness. There was a bonus gift with the deafness too, because I also lost my inner ear gyro, that vestibular balance. So I came home in a wheelchair. So when I started cooking, I would hold on to the counter with one firm grip and then stir with the other hand. Or when I got on the treadmill, I couldn't go for a run because I was falling off the toilet. I mean, that was like pure vertigo. But I would hold on to the stability bar and just hit the quick start and
Mhm.
just walk half a mile an hour. And then I would hit the speed up button once or twice. And it was these little steps. Again, it's like the compound effect. Right? I do these little things. I would get the trekking poles that I used to take into the mountains to go mountain climbing, just do this kind of weird, like daddy long leg crab walk thing with my trekking poles just down the driveway to get to my mailbox and back. And it was just this little win, just a little win.
Hmm.
And then I'll go a little bit further, maybe down to the next driveway and back. And eventually I was walking again and I was building up that inertia. And the mindset part there is that it was another mountain to climb. It was another race to win. And if I can keep building on little wins, I don't have to start from scratch, right? That inertia builds on inertia. It compounds until, you know, it was almost exactly 1 year from being in the hospital, almost dying from the meningitis, to my first marathon back after, getting out of the hospital. And I ran my hometown of Akron, Ohio, ran the Akron Marathon. And it was the same week as my high school 20th reunion. So I went back home, ran the marathon, and then pretended to understand what all my friends were saying in the loud, crowded party area. But um, I was happy because I was still alive and I was still able to make progress.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's challenges. We have these hardships ahead. I have no monopoly on pain. I've no good excuse for quitting. When I was at Walter Reed, there were warriors up and down those halls that had
Right.
they're fighting their own personal battles. So who was I to say my battle was a good enough excuse to quit?
Yeah. So when did you flip the entrepreneurial switch on, and what did that journey look like? Going from, kind of the private sector and the military to, you know, deciding that you're gonna need to figure out a new way to create income and support for your family, and what did that process look like of, you know,
Well, that's
pursuing
fine.
this path of entrepreneurship and another crazy ride and journey to be on?
Yeah, I think I always had a little entrepreneurial spirit. When I was a kid, I would buy packs of bubble gum and stuff, and you get like a whole pack. I'll get a whole sleeves from the Five and Dime for like $1.10 or something. It's 5 or 6 packs of bubble gum, and I would open it up so they're all individual pieces, and I put them in a gallon Ziploc baggie, take them to school, and sell each piece for a quarter and 25 cents for each piece. That's a hell of a markup. By when you're buying 6 packs for $1. But um, I I sold my mom is very artistic. My mom's whole side of the family very creative, very artistic. I love cooking, so my creative spark sent me into the kitchen. But when I was a kid, was in high school, I actually was kind of into crafts like my mom, and I made holiday decorations, little light up Christmas trees and wreaths that I would take into the high school and to the teachers' lounge, put a little price tag on them, and
Right on.
I sold enough to the faculty and parents and stuff to go on a 1 month trip to Australia my sophomore year in high school. Over the summer, and coming back to 2015 when I was just recovering from the meningitis. I was making that fudge. It was so funny too because when I put it in my head that I was going to make this awesome Thanksgiving feast, I started weeks in advance, and I started cooking cakes and cookies and pies and just put them in the freezer for later. And I started making like a batch of fudge, and like that was easy. That was kind of fun. I'll put it to the side, do another batch of fudge, and I was like, okay, let's do little nuts, let's do spices, go to the liquor cabinet, a little bit for me, a little bit in there, and uh, I was having a great time. I was cooking. I was taking batch after batch. My girlfriend, my wife now, girlfriend at the time, said she noticed two things. One was a smile on my face that she hadn't seen in like 6 months because I was cooking. I was having a great time cooking and making this food. And the other thing she noticed was the fudge was piling up. So she started sneaking out the front door. Like, you've got to be real stealthy around a blind deaf guy. But um, she was giving it away, gave it away to the neighbors, friends, and they came back and would ask, "Can we buy a little bit of this for our a baby shower or birthday party coming up?" And of course, the capitalist in me said, "Well, of course you may." And one thing led to another, where it kind of started off like a bake sale type thing right out of our kitchen, and with it, before we knew it, we were like an official business. And we started building this thing up. We moved into a huge, commercial food, kitchen, and extraordinary delights, or EODFudge.com was born.
I love it. And just to give a little insight into where EOD has grown to. So obviously it started in your little kitchen. Where's it at now? What's the big vision for it? And obviously you're generating some income from it, and you're diverting some of that over to some real estate assets. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about real estate. But what is the vision for Extraordinary Delights, and kind of where you got it to today and where you're looking to take it to tomorrow?
We really like it the way it is. We hadn't came to a decision point where we were actually like within months of incorporating and letting the world know that we were selling chocolate, we were getting corporate orders from Boeing and these major insurance companies, and I was already speaking, but then we would get orders for the swag bags all around all the tables. So we'd get
Yeah.
these massive orders. So before a speaking engagement, I'd be up for days cooking, 14-hour days cooking on the stovetop, and it was hilarious because my garage gym, and we lined up the treadmill, the rower, the stationary bike, and one of those conveyor belt shrink wrap machines. And, uh, it was a decision point where should we go brick and mortar, and I considered doing that whole 14-hour cooking day in front of a stove, or standing behind a cash register. And that's my picture of hell.
Yeah.
So we went with a commercial food manufacturer. We hired a larger candy company. I gave them my recipes. They made it just as delicious as I make it. But now they're ordering the supplies, they're hiring the labor, they're doing all the cooking, they're doing the packaging and the shipping, and we became marketers. So, right around the same time as COVID, we started, like everybody else, a TikTok channel, and we started a cooking show. Aaron Hale's Cooking Without Looking. And
That's
we
amazing.
grew that to about 150,000 followers. But the other thing was we were actually generating revenue, which was, it was blowing my mind. But it also afforded us, not being behind the stove. The home kitchen became the R&D lab.
Yeah.
But not being behind the stove or doing all of the other labor intensive operational stuff, it afforded us some time, and we had that revenue. We're like, okay, what do we do with this cash? So we looked into one of our other passions, investing. We were able to actually had time, afforded time to follow what we always dreamed of is investing in real estate. But of course, that um, that was a whole other challenge as a blind deaf guy. What kind of real estate and how? And our very first investment, we decided to go with, or I decided to go with a out of state
Okay.
burr
Okay.
from a online auction site using hard money,
Okay.
and it turned out exactly like you might think it would. It was a complete disaster.
I was gonna say, is it good or bad?
Oh, I made every mistake. Just signing up on the auction site with my own personal name, and then they would not change the contract later with an addendum for our LLC. So then the hard money lender was like, nope, we can't do that. So we went all cash, and I mean, one thing after another. It was another one of those gauntlets.
Was it a single family house or a duplex or big commercial
Single
property?
family,
Single family. Okay.
and thankfully this was 2019, so the market was in our favor. We actually had a great team that we put together. I used David Green's, you know,
Yeah.
core four mentality, because for me, when it comes to anything, right, running has become a team sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very unsafe for me to just lace up and step out the front door. But same thing with real estate. 5 miles or 5 states over, it's about the same for me. I'm not going to hop in my car and go to an open house or anything like that. So I had to find my team, and we built a pretty amazing team. And where our investment strategy has evolved into more. We love doing the turnkey thing, or we love doing the burr strategy into STR or burster or
Okay.
burr and B. However, it's a time and capital intensive, so we've graduated into more turnkey short-term rentals, and we'll use a DSCR loan with a private money kicker, just to do almost 90 to even 100% um, loan. You know, and it's been working out great for us. We love the hospitality thing, and I just love finding deals.
That's awesome. Now, how are you coming across these opportunities, and what does the portfolio look like? I know obviously it's always fun to hear the humble beginnings and the stories of the early days, and I think it's always inspiring for people to hear and see people continue to push through and look up. I remember when I bought my first flip at 21 and started kind of build my own rental portfolio, and then
You know,
if you would have told me what my commercial real estate portfolio consists of today, and that I even broke into commercial, and it's always fun to see where this journey takes us and unfolds to. So, what's the portfolio look like today, and how are you kind of finding these opportunities and continuing to expand your portfolio, your cash flow?
well, what's great is, you start off small and just like I'm talking about the running or everything else. It just you take one step after another.
Yeah.
And we built a fudge company, and that generates revenue that we can put into finding these, uh, residential, single family or small multifamily apartments that we turn into short-term rentals. That cash flow in turn, we can put into more passive income, and we're limited partners on some syndications. So as far as the portfolio goes, it's kind of a mix. Uh, we've got a total of 8 units now between our properties in Akron, Ohio, and here in the Florida Panhandle.
Awesome.
But then we're also in a couple of syndications and just looking to do more.
That's amazing, brother. Now, for those that want to engage with you, your story, you've got tons of great content. Obviously, they can, if they like fudge, right, they can find you and kind of go down that route. You've got, obviously an amazing story and just extremely inspiring with how you approach and look life and share and look to lift up others along the way. So for those that want to connect with you, your brands, your story, I know you're doing, a lot more speaking now. What are, some of the different ways that people can connect and engage with you along that journey?
Well, pretty easy to find on all the social media sites: Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. Um, you can also find me on my podcast at Point of Impact with Aaron Hale. And of course, you can reach me through EODFudge.com or pointofimpactpod.com.
We will be sure to link up all of those on Aaron Hale's episode, millionairemindcast.com. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the show today, brother.
Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Well, that wraps up today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, you guys know this show would not be what it is without you, the amazing listener, the support, sharing this out with other people who can gain value from it, taking 60 seconds to leave a review. If you haven't done so already, those things mean the world to us and ultimately help us spread this message out to as many people as we possibly can to help them on their wealth building journey. If you have any particular links or resources that you're trying to track down that were mentioned in this interview, be sure to check out this episode at millionairemindcast.com, where you can find access to all that information. And of course, if you haven't checked out the Wise Investor Vault yet, be sure to head over to wiseinvestorvault.com to check out all the tools, all the resources, the checklists, the spreadsheets, the trackers, all kinds of amazing things that can help you on your wealth building journey at the wiseinvestorvault.com. If you haven't connected with me on social media yet, I'm consistently putting out more content, stories, value to help you on your wealth building journey. And one of the best and most exciting things for me on a weekly basis is getting to connect with you guys. Getting your DMs, hearing what things impacted you, what you need help with is a big way that we continue to drive the content for this show. So if we're not connected and following each other on Instagram, on social media at Official Matty A, give me a like and a follow. Would love to connect with you there. And of course, don't forget to get on my deals list. If you're an accredited investor, you want to look at more deal flow. You want to see what deals I have access to, what deals I'm raising capital for. This is an exclusive list that I only put out to my accredited investor list, my Millionaire Mindcast family. So text the word deals to 844-447-1555. And with that being said, thank you again so much for supporting the show. Until next week's episode, keep investing in yourself and your wealth on your march to $1 million and beyond. Cheers.